God's grace and his mercy and his peace are yours in Jesus Christ our Savior. It's funny. We do the creed every week, and sometimes I think we almost kind of skip over it like perfunctory. Every time we do it, I am so encouraged when I stand here and hear you say it, because I go, thank God I'm not alone. Thank God I'm not alone. So a favorite Christmas movie. I don't know, you may have your favorites. One of my very favorites is A Christmas Story and Ralphie. And Ralphie just has to have, what does he have to have? Red Ryder BB gun, right? And there's a whole description, he says, whatever it is. Red Ryder, 100 shot, automatic reload BB gun, or whatever it is. Red Ryder BB gun. And it's a great story. I forget how old he is in the story, 9 maybe. He has the intense hopes of a 9-year-old boy, and an imagination to go with it, doesn't he? As the story unfolds, and everything, all his hopes, all his energy, everything that he's doing in this season leading up to Christmas is all about how can he possibly make sure that he can get a Red Ryder BB gun. And so he's not certain that he's going to get it, is he? Because, the parents kind of say some stuff, and parents do that at Christmas too. And he's not certain. They're not well off. It's not a fancy house. He's not sure. He's not always a super obedient kid. He doesn't always do his chores the way he's supposed to. He fights with his little brother sometimes. And he's trying to put a good face on. He's trying to be good. He's trying to score all the points he needs to score so that he can possibly get this thing for which he is just fervently, fiercely hoping. He writes a theme about it. Remember, a theme. He has to write a theme. And he saves his box tops, and he listens to the radio show, and he takes down the secret codes so that he can make sure that he is on track to get the Red Ryder BB gun, the culmination of his hopes and dreams. It's an interesting movie, isn't it? Because, of course, we know how it ends, and he does get it. And he's just thrilled. But the other members in the family, I think they have hopes too. And I always find it weird when they build whole college courses on stupid things like a movie like that. But I don't think it hurts when you're watching it to stop and say, I wonder what Dad's goals were. Darren McGavin, the guy who plays Darren McGavin, swears like a sailor, that guy. He's all about the turkey and all about that. But one of my favorite lines in almost any movie is when he gets that box delivered to him, and it's that lamp. It's a major award. Yeah, fragile, right? It must be from Italy. Or France, I forget what he says. But it's a major award, right? And he has to keep saying that to people. Why'd you hide it? He says to Mom, why'd you hide it? Well, of course we know why she hid it. It's hideous. And it's a major award. I think his hope is significance. And then Mom, and I'm just making this up. You can disagree with me all you want. It's all good. But I love looking at movies that I've seen 100 times and wondering what other stuff is in there. What about Mom? Mom almost is an ignored character in the thing, and yet she cares for her family so faithfully and so well. I'm guessing that her hope was that somebody would notice how much she loves her family. And then, of course, Randy, he's just hoping he can get to school without getting beat up. Little brother. And so I think it's a fascinating study on hope at Christmas. And that's really where we're going here today, because there are hope stealers. There are those things that want to take away hope. When we ask this question, where were you when? You know what kind of question I'm asking? For my older brothers, who are 10 and 12 years older than me, the seminal moment in their life, I think, was, where were you when JFK was assassinated? For my era, it might be when the planes flew into the Twin Towers. And growing up there, it was a huge, huge deal for me. I can remember exactly where I was. I remember what time it was. I remember trying to desperately make phone calls back to my friends in New York and not being able to get through and being terrified what had happened. I don't know how you answer that question. And I'm wondering, because I was reading a study on this, and the author was saying most of the times when we ask that question, where were you when, it's often a negative thing. It's often a negative thing. And you know what's interesting for me? Even though I could come up with that when I was reading it, I said, well, what's a negative thing? Well, it was that incident, 9/11, for me anyway, that I can think of. I can remember where I was when my mom was diagnosed with brain tumor, inoperable brain tumor. I can remember that. But you know which ones stick with me the most? It's the birth of my kids. I remember exactly where I was in the process even. When Teresa said to me, we're having a baby. I remember it. When we were at the hospital, when she calls me and says, I think we need to go now. For both kids. I can count the day. I can recount the day for you hour by hour. And when Sarah was born, I can picture, I know the room, I know exactly where I was, I knew who was with us. One of our best friends waiting in the hallway, never told a word, waiting in the hallway. I can tell you all about it, the birth of our kids. Most significant moment in my life. In my life. I'm going to argue with the author of that and say I think it's the birth of a kid. And for us as Christians, that's what we're all about for these next 4 weeks. It's the birth of our hope. Hope was born at Christmas. That's going to be our theme here. Our theme for the whole year is living hope. 1 Peter, we have a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Christ. And we want to use that theme to talk about hope was born because it's a person. It's not an idea. It's a Savior. So I'm going to argue that I think the greatest of those hopes are grounded in a birth, in a baby, in a new life. And I want to give you 3 things here, and they come from 3 different readings about, at the same time, it would be very easy to recount the events of the last 8 to 10 months and describe all the things which are attempting to steal our hope from us. Because hope is often destroyed by uncertainty. And if there's anything that's come out of this pandemic, it's uncertainty. I don't know who to believe. I don't know which data to understand. I don't know which assured results of science I'm supposed to accept. I don't know which proclamation from which leader, candidate, news source I'm supposed to accept as trustworthy. I have no idea. I have no idea. In fact, you know, it's funny. A number of weeks ago, before the election, I said, let me give you the best recommendation I can give to you. Please turn off your TV. I must have gotten 20 emails on that. Thank you. People just thanking me, texts and emails, thank you. Because it's filled with uncertainty. Do you ever, I mean, seriously, in all seriousness, do you ever really read stuff that you see on news, on the internet or wherever, and feel more certain after you're done? Really? I mean, I'm not kidding. The only words in the last 10 months that I've read that make me more certain after I read them is this one. And so that's our message here in Advent, to go to those things which give certainty, because I'm going to note 3 things which desperately try to make us uncertain and steal our hope from us. Now, I don't want you to fill in the blanks, Pam, but if you would for me, and forgive me for not alerting you ahead of time, and our team is so great, thank you again. Point 1, don't fill in the blank. Darkness. That's a hope stealer, isn't it? It feels like it's been pretty dim. It's been hard to see a lot of light. Second one, injustice. And I don't immediately mean for your mind to go to, although it's certainly included, racial injustice, class injustice. I get that. Seriously, I don't mean to at all be insensitive to that. But there's not a human being in this room who has not been deeply injured by injustice. It could be as small a thing as a friend who turned their back on you because they believed a lie. You know what I mean? It could be that you lost your job because somebody treated you without justice. It could be that you may have served time or paid a huge penalty unjustly. It could be that someone was promoted you see what I'm saying? And I get it. It could be the color of your skin. It could be the socioeconomic group you grew up with. It might have been your ethnicity or your accent. All of those things can arise in injustice, correct? They can arise in that way. People can treat one another quite poorly. It steals hope, doesn't it? Especially if it happens more than once. Injustice you can give away to people just being idiots sometimes. Sorry, that's not very Christian of me, is it? What I just said. But I think you understand what I mean. People being petty or foolish or silly, But when it happens repeatedly, that steals your hope. Because so much of our hope, especially in this nation, is built upon opportunity. If I'm given an equal chance, give me an equal chance. And that's a great blessing that I think many, many people have taken advantage of. But the third thing, Pam, if you don't mind, is loss. Loss, I think, takes away hope. So let's take those three things. Let's go back to one. So first one is darkness, and the second one is injustice. The third one is loss. Hope stealers. And I'm going to say that they're overcome by these three markers. Now, I'm going to pull a fast one on you, I hope, because I want you to stop and go, oh, I didn't expect that. And then jot a note or two or think about this. Because what would you expect? Darkness is overcome by light. I'm going to tell you, that's not what I'm going to tell you here. Darkness is overcome by a promise. Let me explain. When I was a little boy, 10, 11, 12 years old, I've told you this before, I was a New York City Boy Scout. And we would go camp in Jersey. And so, but in winter, we would go to upstate New York. And if any of you are really familiar with New York, it is a stunningly gorgeous state and has many wild, deeply rugged portions of it, especially upstate. Amazing place, just absolutely stunning, and cold, and snow. And so I remember, and I forget, 5th grade was when I was in Boy Scouts, so what would that be, 10 or 11? We go on our first camping trip, winter camping. And you're not going to a hotel. I mean, it's not even tents. It's a lean-to with a huge open front that sleeps about 12 dudes. It's a big lean-to. And there's a fire pit in front of it, which does absolutely nothing except fill the place with smoke. Now, it's great to camp in the winter, but those of you here who know this, who have camped, it requires excellent gear. If you have excellent gear, winter camping is a kick. It's a blast. Ice fish, snowshoe, it's awesome. And the things you see are completely different. It's wonderful. My parents had no money. I mean, they both worked for the church. They sacrificed their lives to serve the church. And so I go camping with a sleeping bag that I think was made of tissue paper. I mean, it wouldn't keep you warm in July. I have boots. They don't know. My parents have no idea what thermal means. I don't have fleece line, nothing. I don't have nothing. And so I'm like 10, and I'm on this camping trip. It's like 0. And now, I'm using this as an illustration for what I hope is a far more serious point. Because I believe there was a point in that night, and I'm crying. I mean, I'm a little boy trying to be tough. Because it was a point where I believed that the morning would not come. I'm not kidding. And that sounds silly maybe, but you despair. Your feet are so frozen. You are hurting, and you don't want to, God forbid that you should start bawling in front of the buddies or the kids who are 12 or 14 beat you up. And that kind of thing. And so you're in a night in which you believe the sun will not rise. Anybody been there? In a far more dire circumstance than what I'm describing. A night in which you believe the sun will not rise, and yet you know it will. It does. It does. And it's my job, people, as to serve you, to remind you that some of you or people that you love may be in that night right now. The sun will rise because God promised it to be so. You see that text? Arise, shine, for your light will come. For your light has come. Isn't that interesting? Past tense. For your light has come. But then look at what the next line says. Darkness covers the earth and thick darkness the people. Now you want to go, wait. I thought you said the light has come. Because if the light has come, there's no more darkness, right? No. It's a promise. Do you get what I'm saying? It's a promise. Darkness does cover the peoples. Darkness covers the land. but the light's coming. And he says it, the prophet says it, because God promised it. I can say it in past tense. Already done. But what I want you to hear from me, I get it. Not just that. There are other dark moments in my life that I'm not want to sharing with you at the moment, but you've been there, haven't you? Where the night is so dark that you do not believe that the sun will rise. It will, because it's a promise made by God. Second point. Injustice. Now, what's it overcome by? Justice, right? Fairness. Injustice is overcome by fairness. I'm not going to use that. Different word. Do you know that there are today in our world, we rarely think about this in the United States or in Europe, there are over 360 million individuals who are currently under regimes, under nations that outlaw Christianity. 360 million Christians in the world that we know of. That we know of. 3,000 Christians are executed a year that we know of for their faith. Unjustly. For their faith. This is a huge value in Western civilization, particularly for Americans. I am, to be honest, quite grateful for the ruling that said by the Supreme Court, the Constitution and the First Amendment don't go away because there's a pandemic. People still have the right to worship. I'm grateful for that. I'm thankful. Because injustice is not simply corrected by the rule of law. Injustice is not simply corrected because there's a Constitution or Bill of Rights. One justice difference on that, and the exact opposite opinion is rendered. You get what I'm saying? So here's my point. Injustice is not corrected by justice. It's not corrected by a system, by the rule of law. Injustice is overcome by the coming of the true King. Let me read it for you. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you've shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning and fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Folks, I'm just telling you, if we're putting our hope that injustice will be solved because we elected a certain person or diselected another person or got the right governor or the right judge or did something like that, good luck with that. What I am telling you is our task, our joy in the church is to say injustice is corrected by the coming of the true King. That King, the child which is born, because the government rests upon his shoulders. Third thing. The third joy stealer would be loss. And what would we naturally think what would correct it? Gain. Gain. So when my mom passed away in 1987, we gathered as a family, of course. We were down in Arizona, and we had a bunch of people there because she was only 62. So, the younger you are when you pass, the more people show up. And so there was a gob of our family, big extended family and cousins and so forth. And I remember Teresa and I were sitting at a family event, and people were kind of reminiscing, and one couple kind of shared from our family and said, gosh, isn't it just sad? And we kind of said, what do you think? Well, Lucille, that was my mom's name, and Ralph, my dad, said, it's kind of sad, isn't it? Their whole life was just the church. They didn't have season tickets to the symphony. And they didn't go to Broadway shows once every 3 or 4 years. You know, they didn't have memberships at a club. They didn't do, you know, I don't know, they didn't play golf. They didn't take lots and lots of trips other than in this family station wagon. You know, my mom was a Lutheran school teacher and a principal. My dad wrote children's materials for the church. And, you know, I mean, he was a teacher and a principal too in Lutheran schools, in tiny little towns and places, and they never made much money. And it's funny, as Teresa and I sat there, I mean, we were young, we were in our 20s, so we really, I guess, didn't feel like we had the oomph to argue with what they were, but we went out of there later and we said that just broke our heart because we both said, we hope somebody says that about us, that their whole life was serving God's people, their whole life. And of course, I understood what they meant. It was not meant nasty. But it's too bad because people can look at that life and say, what a waste. What a waste. There's a character in the Christmas story that we sometimes overlook, Simeon, and then Anna. And when Jesus is born, 8 days in, they're observing the law, and they go to the temple for Jesus' circumcision and naming. And when they go to the temple, and they're lucky, they're in Bethlehem. It's a suburb, kind of. So they're able to get into the temple. And you know what's interesting? Here's this old dude. And you know, Simeon had been told by God, he served in the temple, and he's elderly, he's old. So was Anna, prophetess. And God had revealed to Simeon, you will not die until you see the Lord's Messiah. And so Simeon, wanting not to miss what God had promised, lived in the temple. He spent all his days in the temple. And you can be sure that any number of Simeon's relatives, children, grandchildren, they might have sat there having their glass of Manischewitz and said, isn't that sad about Grandpa? His whole life was just left wasted in the temple. He wasted his life. And you know what but you know what? Simeon's in the book. And you know why? Because there came a point when he held in his hands a new life. Loss is overcome by new life. There is a true thing that every one of us, and this may sound sad or macabre, I don't mean it to be. It's just the truth. We're all going to die. When and how, we don't know. Who knows? I don't know. And there's too many of us that think we're somehow exempt. That somehow we won't get sick, or you won't get cancer, or you never get in an accident. Or I'm not saying it will happen. We don't know. God knows it. But every one of us dies unless Christ comes and takes us home before then. So we all die. That's the truth. But God in his faithfulness and his goodness constantly brings new life, new seasons, new lives into our life. I mean, in our family, I don't know. I hope I don't talk too much about it. Thank God I got to spend Thanksgiving with a grandchild. It's awesome. It's a new life. It brought new life to our family. God does that. Even in the most tragic of losses, God brings new life, new opportunities, new doors. And God has personified it. He puts his money where his mouth is. He says, I'm going to give you a new life. It's going to be me. And so the way he overcomes loss, the loss of any loss, the greatest of any losses, is that he himself, taking on arms and legs, squirming and wiggling, and in your arms, and he brings new life that overcomes those things that want to steal our hope. That's our Advent. That's what we get to declare. That in a season in which many would love to steal our hope, God instead of darkness, he makes us a promise. Instead of injustice, the true king is coming to rule in our hearts. And instead of loss, he brings new life. In the name of Jesus, amen.